Welcome to Where Are They Now? We reach into the archives of Lenape, Shawnee, Cherokee, and Seneca high schools and invite selected alumni to share memories and fill us in on their career paths after commencement. Since Lenape's first graduating class in 1961, Shawnee's in 1972, Cherokee's in 1978, and Seneca's in 2005, over 65,000 individuals have received diplomas from these four schools. Here now is your host, DJ Dini.
Welcome to another episode of Where Are They Now? Today, we will be reconnecting with an alum from Shawnee's class of 2005, Ryan McCue. Ryan is a rotary wing aviator for the United States Coast Guard, and he currently lives in Houston, Texas. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Let's go back to Shawnee High School, 2005. Looking at a time that, you're just trying to find out what you want to do with your life and get used to high school environment and moving on with your education. Any memories from Shawnee High School that you can share with us that, really stick out?
Yeah, I would say there was a couple. I was actually one of the lucky or unlucky, depending how you look at it, students who actually had one of my parents as a teacher at Shawnee. My mom, Mrs. McCue, is a history teacher, was and still is a history teacher at Shawnee. So I guess just kind of, 4 years, kind of getting to see her every day was always kind of nice. And then, through her, most of the teachers knew me. So, I guess it was a double-edged sword where all the teachers knew me, but on the same token, couldn't really act up or, get out of line or anything like that. So I'd say that along with, I was lucky enough to play baseball for 4 years at Shawnee through the baseball team with Coach Brian Anderson. Was actually part of the organization with Sean Doolittle, who's now a pitcher for the Oakland A's, kind of going through him. So got to see a lot of cool baseball. Shawnee won the state championship, I think, when I was a sophomore. So a lot of cool memories kind of being involved with that and being part of that team and kind of doing and seeing some cool things that went along with that.
Tell us more about Coach Anderson. You said he really kind of helped shape your high school experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, so he is also a teacher in the humanities department with my mom. So I think I had known Coach Anderson probably since elementary school, if not middle school. So a great coach, a great person to learn a lot of leadership from. Definitely learned a lot of great work ethic and, life skills just from baseball, which kind of translated to, the rest of my life as far as, working hard, always giving max effort. And putting your best foot forward are definitely some great things that I took away from baseball.
Now, you mentioned when we talked earlier, Lorraine Wiest as somebody that you remember fondly from Shawnee. Tell us about her.
Yes, Miss Wiest, again, another colleague of my mother's, was a great teacher. I was lucky enough to have her as a economics teacher, I believe my senior year, and just kind of the passion that she taught school with. It's funny. I consider myself a bit more of a conservative, where she probably leans a little bit more liberal. So we'd always have some pretty spirited debates on, what we thought best policies would be for, what would be the best way forward for our country and, how it's governed and everything like that. But definitely great as far as, challenging myself and other students, to think critically, to back up whatever their beliefs are with, reasonable arguments. Were definitely some good skills that helped me develop as a person and shape my viewpoint on the world.
Now, in addition to baseball, you also mentioned volunteer activities as something that you remembered fondly from high school. Tell us a little bit about some of the things you did to volunteer when you were at Shawnee.
Yeah, so Shawnee has some great opportunities. I'm sure they still do now, but I guess 10 years ago they had some great clubs and extracurricular activities where you could actually kind of give back to the community, whether it's through food drives, Habitat for Humanity, and some other different volunteer projects. So when I was there, I would try and always, do whatever I could to volunteer, whether it was helping out with the food drive or the toy drive. And actually that was a great way to kind of meet people that I didn't necessarily know. Back when I went to Shawnee, we were actually had a bunch of different towns rather than just Medford Lakes that went there. So we also had Tabernacle and Shamong. So a lot of those students I didn't know because I didn't go to elementary and middle school with them. So it was a great way to kind of reach out, meet new people, and do a lot of good towards the community and give back to to those who need our help. So it was really a great opportunity to kind of dive into all the different activities around the school that you could do to help the community around you.
Now, you mentioned how the schools kind of changed back then. Were you one of the ones that had the choice of choosing whether or not to go over to Seneca, or were you?
Yes, I believe so. I think it was actually my class, the class of 2005, that actually had a choice after our sophomore year. So going into the junior year, students from Tabernacle Shemong actually had a choice to go over to Seneca High School and be the first class out of there. So I do remember a few classmates that were, with me at Shawnee our first 2 years, and then decided to go over to Seneca and graduate from there for the last 2 years. So it was kind of interesting to have a new school open up right, when we were going through high school.
Tell me about your senior trip.
Yeah, so senior trip, I believe they still go to Florida, so that's what we did. And actually, that was a great time. You get to go through Florida with your week, or get to go to Walt Disney World for a week with some of your closest friends. You share a lot of good memories. Me and my wife, who was actually a friend of mine in high school, we still talk about our trip to Disney World as seniors and the fun we had then.
Okay, so as you finish up your high school, you pretty much, are you deciding what you wanted to do, or were you unsure? Tell me how we got to where you went to college.
Sure. So it's funny. Actually, as young as I can remember, I knew that I wanted to be a part of aviation and fly in some capacity. And as I got a little bit older, I knew that probably military service is also something that I really wanted to be a part of. So entering in high school, I was very interested in actually going to the United States Air Force Academy and going that route and becoming an officer in the Air Force and hopefully a pilot in the Air Force. But at the time, between my junior and my senior year, I realized that I should probably look into all the different services just to kind of see what they all had. And by the time my senior year came around, I started looking into the Coast Guard and seeing the missions they do and what a kind of a cool, small, unique little service it is. And that really kind of piqued my interest, especially the flying in the Coast Guard, as opposed to the flying in all the services, really kind of interests me. So my senior year, I applied to all the service academies, the Coast Guard Academy included, and I actually didn't find out until a little bit later on the ball, or a little bit later in the game, that I actually got accepted in the Coast Guard Academy. I think it was April or May of my senior year is when I finally found out. So I had a pretty short turnaround time as far as having decided to get myself ready, because unlike normal colleges, all the service academies actually start in the end of June. So from the time I graduated high school to the time I had to report for the Coast Guard Academy, I think I only had 16 days of my senior summer vacation. So, but it was pretty quick. But yeah, I was just really interested in aviation, really interested in military service, and once I kind of did my research, found that what the Coast Guard had a lot of cool missions as far as helping the general public, a unique dual military and law enforcement role that really just kind of piqued my interest and made me really want to join it.
Now, it's located in Connecticut. Did the location have anything to do with also your decision, where some of the other institutions were located, the academies?
Actually, not really. It's funny. So I wasn't originally born in New Jersey. We actually moved to New Jersey from Colorado when I think I was in first grade. So I was all right with kind of being away from home. And with, again, my first choice being the Air Force Academy, which is out in Colorado Springs, Colorado, I really didn't have too much an issue of getting that far away from home. In fact, until I had found out that I was going to go to the Coast Guard Academy, I was actually slotted and all signed up to go to Embry-Riddle University, which is an aeronautical university in Prescott, Arizona. So yeah, the distance didn't have too much to factor in as far as my choice, but once I started my 4 years and being so close to home, it definitely was a nice benefit that I was just a quick train ride, away from home on the weekends and stuff like that.
So you spent 4 years there from '05 to '09, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
And now, for everybody watching, how does it work as far as, is there a declared major when you go to a service academy? What's involved with that?
The service academy experience isn't quite the same as a typical college experience, or even those who join ROTC programs experience. It is a full immersion from the day you step in. You are in the military, and your day is pretty much set about from when you wake up at 6 in the morning till when you go to bed, at 10 o'clock at night, or if not later. Your summers aren't really the same. It's not like you get done with the semester in May and then you just go home for the whole summer. You have all these summer training events where you travel around the country. You visit different active duty Coast Guard units. You get all these sorts of different trainings. You get weapons trainings, a whole bunch of things over your 4 years. And as far as the academic load goes, the academy does have, I believe it's 6 or 7 declared majors. It's very heavy in science and engineering. So the major I actually went through was mechanical engineering. And just like any other normal colleges, you start your freshman year You can declare a major then, but most of your freshman classes are kind of core classes. Everyone graduates with a bachelor's of science, so you have to graduate, or you have to go through some of your core, math and science classes, whether it be calculus, chemistry, physics. And then once you get into your sophomore and then on, you kind of start diving more into what your major emphasis classes would be, along with all your military training classes, and also your summer training kind of goes along with that.
So you get a Bachelor of Science, but you said you also had a commission. Is that guaranteed when you graduate? How does that work?
Sure, yeah. So the two things that you get from any service academy, be it Coast Guard Academy, West Point Naval Academy, is once you graduate, you meet all the graduating requirements. And it's both academic requirements, military requirements, and physical requirements. You're actually required to take a physical fitness test each semester, and there is a minimum passing. But if you meet all those requirements and you graduate, you'll graduate with a bachelor's degree in whatever your choosing major will be, a commission in the United States military for whatever military service you went to, and a guaranteed job when you graduate. Because once you get commissioned, then you'll get an assignment for whatever your first tour once you graduate, as a military officer or a commissioned officer.
So after you get out of college, some of the post-college activities that you mentioned, I'm going to just go through the list and you can elaborate on some of them.
Sure.
Golf club president, Coast Guard Academy cadet, company commander, aviation club member, Society of American Military Engineers. You graduated with honors. You marched with President Obama's first inaugural parade. Summer internship at the Coast Guard Aviation Logistics Center. Sailed for 6 weeks on the Coast Guard Cutter Eagle. And a temporary duty assignment from Astoria, Oregon to Mobile, Alabama to Georgia, Miami, Florida. Any of those things that were very memorable? I would assume some of them are.
Yeah, so I mean that was all done through the Coast Guard Academy. So one thing I always like to say when people ask me, or high school students ask about any military services, is you get some pretty unique opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily get at any other normal college. You mentioned President Obama's first inaugural parade. I was actually lucky enough and had the honor to march in that as a contingent of Coast Guard Academy cadets, and to be able to march in that kind of historic moment was something really cool and something I kind of really treasure to look back on. I remember looking back on it, it wasn't that fun at the time, because I remember it just being absolutely freezing cold, and just kind of standing outside in Washington, D.C. all day while we were kind of waiting for our turn to march in the parade. But to look back on that and be able to tell my grandkids years from now that I marched in his inaugural parade is something that's pretty cool. And then just all the temporary duty assignments that you have during the summer. You go all over the country. You mentioned that I mentioned sailing on Eagle. So Eagle is this big sailing ship. It's actually the only active duty tall ship in the U.S. inventory. And if you kind of think of like a Pirates of the Caribbean, it's the same thing like that. It's a 3-mast square rig bark sailing vessel, and we sailed all over the Caribbean. We sailed to Bermuda, to Puerto Rico. Just a lot of cool stories of, you go aloft in the rigging where you actually climb up the mast and take the sails out. It's kind of being like transported back to another time and place as far as the seas go. So you learn a lot about the sea while you're out there. You learn a lot of, little leadership lessons while you're doing that. Hauling on lines, looking at the different departments on the ship, what makes the ship run, from all the officers who are kind of running everything to the supply department that are in charge of making sure that the ship gets all its food, all its fuel, and all its stores as required every time it's in report. You definitely learn a lot about what makes any sort of organization run, and the leadership that's required to make it run smoothly.
You're currently a rotary wing aviator.
Mm-hmm.
How did we get to that point? Was there a lot of things that happened before that got you to where you are now?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, even before I got in the Coast Guard, I knew I wanted to fly in some capacity and be an aviator in the military. So once I entered the academy, I did everything. I figured out everything you had to do to make sure that I could make that dream happen. And so a lot of what it is done is you can actually go straight to Naval Flight School out of the academy, and we actually, all Coast Guard pilots, we actually go through the same naval flight training that Marine Corps pilots, Navy pilots go through. So I pretty much figured out everything that was required for me to get to that point, and I just kind of really worked my butt off to make sure that I had good grades, a good standing amongst my class, so good class ranking, and I just expressed anything aviation that I could do, I would just dive into, whether it was flying on the weekends, taking glider lessons, having an internship my senior year that was at the Aviation Logistics Center for the Coast Guard, which is where we do all our major repair and overhaul on our Coast Guard aircraft. And then once I did that and I was graduated, I was able to actually get accepted into flight school. It's a very competitive program. Usually, at your graduating class, they will only accept about 10% of students into the flight training portion of it. So I was lucky enough to be, part of that 10% of graduating cadets that were accepted. And then from there, it's a 2-year rigorous program in Pensacola, Florida. You go through pretty much just 2 years of everything from aviation theory. You start out flying single engine turboprop aircraft with they're actually closer to fighter jets than they are a Cessna that you would see at a normal airport. These things have dual ejection seats. You actually have to wear a G suit while you're flying them and an oxygen mask. They're fully aerobatic. They can get up to about 300 knots. So it's very much a crawl, walk, run program where you do a whole bunch of ground school. You learn about theory of aviation, different aircraft systems. You learn about aviation survival, what to do if you had to, eject in the ocean, water survival on your rafts and everything like that. And then from there, you move on to your first aircraft, which is that single engine turboprop I was talking about. And you learn the basics. You just learn kind of how to land, how to take off, how to turns. And then it happens really quickly because you're pretty much flying every day. And within probably about the first, I want to say 10 flights, they pretty much, more or less, they give you the keys to the aircraft and you go out and we call you solo. So you take this, $5 million aircraft by yourself. You're 23, 24 years old, and you say, and they let you go fly it out for an hour and you just kind of fly around, do a couple touch and go landings on your own. And then you kind of just move on through the different syllabuses. There's a precision aerobatic syllabus. So if you've ever been to an air show and you've seen the planes do the loops and the barrel rolls and stuff like that, you're doing exactly the same thing. Granted, it's a little bit at a higher altitude, but you learn how to do that. And then once you're done with that, they do the same thing. You actually get to go out. They let you do all that stuff by yourself without actually having an instructor in the back. You learn how to do formation flying. So it'll be you and another aircraft flying within close proximity to each other. You learn basic visual navigation, basic instrument navigation, night flying. And to get through that first part takes about 8 months from start to finish with all the different classes and all the different flight syllabus that you have to go through. And then once you're done with that is where you kind of go into what your designated aviation pipeline will be. So in the Coast Guard, we have two kind of main pipelines. We have rotary wing, which would be helicopters, and then we have multi-engine or fixed wing transport slash maritime surveillance pipeline. So for me, I was lucky enough to select rotary wing aviation because I thought being a helicopter pilot would be really cool. It looked like it'd be really cool in all the movies. And it's the same sort of thing. You kind of start in a crawl, walk, run sequence for about another 9 months. Where really for the helicopter, a lot of the forward flight aspects is very similar to flying a plane. But once you kind of get into hover, things are totally different. They say that if you can ride a unicycle and juggle at the same time, it kind of takes the same amount of coordination to keep a helicopter hovering. And really, for the first couple flights, you go out with the instructor, you go out to these giant fields in the middle of nowhere. They have these boxes that are about the size of a football field. And the instructor will put you in maybe a 20-foot hover over that box and just say, all right, stay inside the box. And you kind of look at the instructor and you're like, oh, well, that doesn't look that hard. And then as soon as he starts giving you some of the different control inputs, you get all wobbly, and it only takes about 10 seconds for him to take over. So yeah, you go from that. You learn a whole bunch of different helicopter-specific flying as far as how to fly with external loads. So you can actually sling a load to the bottom of the helicopter, learning how to fly along with that. Different low-level navigation techniques, and then as you move on, you learn instrument flying just like you did in the airplanes, and then you kind of culminates with night vision flying. So you actually learn how to use night vision goggles like you might see in the movies where you see everything and it looks all green and everything like that. But you learn how to fly with that, and you learn how to night flying. Then from there, you were actually designated a naval aviator. So you get these wings right here. You're a naval aviator, but you're not qualified on a Coast Guard aircraft. So from there, you actually have to go through what we call our transition course on Coast Guard aircraft, and that's where you get designated to fly in your actual specific Coast Guard aircraft. So that course is actually done in Mobile, Alabama, and it's anywhere from a 6 to 8 week course, depending on what your airframe type is. And that's where you learn the more Coast Guard missions, as far as Homeland Security patrols, law enforcement missions, and the big one we do is search and rescue missions, where we're actually doing hoisting operations, kind of like you might see in the movies or on TV, where the helicopter is actually out over the ocean, lowering a basket down with our rescue swimmer, who are kind of our rescue technicians in the back, and picking up survivors who might be, in a life raft or something like that, is kind of the core mission of what you do. So all said and done, I started that whole training process in September of 2009. And by the time I was finished and actually designated in a Coast Guard aircraft, it was September of 2011. So it's about a 2-year process from start to finish. And then you only really kind of come out as a co-pilot. There's still these different upgrade syllabus you have to go before you're actually the person in charge of the aircraft where you're signing for, and you're what we call the pilot in command. So it's a lengthy process.
Now, you mentioned the movies and TV several times in the process. If you had to pick a show or a movie that you felt most accurately depicted, what it's actually like,
sure.
Could you pick one?
Yeah, so there's actually a great series of shows on the Weather Channel called Coast Guard Alaska or Coast Guard Florida. It's actually produced by Al Roker, who you might know from the Today Show. And they actually take real cameras on board Coast Guard aircraft and Coast Guard small boats and actually watch them prosecute real Coast Guard missions. So I would say that's probably the most accurate and most real life portrayal of what we do on a daily basis. And then I always got to throw in the movie The Guardian with Kevin Costner and Ashton Kutcher as being a pretty good indicator of what it's like to be a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. They got to bend it a little bit for Hollywood, but it's actually pretty accurate as far as what their training requirements are and all the physical stuff they go through for their training.
Now, some of your accomplishments, the Coast Guard Letter of Commendation, Coast Guard Meritus, Coast Guard Unit Commendation, Coast Guard Presidential Unit Citation. Some of these awards, can you talk about some of them and what went into those?
Sure. So one of the awards I got was a Commandant's Letter of Commendation Award for a medevac case that we actually had 2 summers ago, back in the summer of 2014. And basically the way our air station works in Houston is we're kind of like a firehouse where we have 3 helicopters, and at any one time we always have a search and ready crew that's on a 24-hour alert. So 24/7 they're on an alert status, kind of just like a firehouse. So we rotate through that, and you usually do 24 hours at a time. So I happen to be one of the crews that were on it, and we got a call for a man that was on a offshore supply vessel that was probably about 30 to 40 miles offshore that was actually suffering a lot of symptoms of a heart attack. So we flew out there. It was the middle of the night. Conditions were a little on the sketchy side. The winds were a little bit high. We didn't really have a lot of good illumination. For anyone that's ever been out on the boat or out in the middle of nowhere at night, it gets dark. It's a lot more dark than you think, just being, in the city or something like that. So, and what that can do for us flying is it can be very disorienting, because our primary, sensory for flying is our vision. And once you kind of take that away, a lot of kind of screwy things can happen with us where you have to rely on your instruments. So it was a very dark night. It was kind of windy. The man actually happened to be pretty large, so it was a bit of a trouble to kind of actually get him situated where we could actually pick him up on the hoist. And then we were able to pick him up despite the challenging conditions, and we were able to bring him to the hospital and get him to a higher level of medical care, which is it's always nice. You kind of go through, as I mentioned before, that 2 years of training, and a lot of times it's a grind. It's a lot of studying. You have to kind of memorize all these different systems, all these different procedures, all these different emergency procedures. And sometimes you kind of just lose sight of, the end goal. But then when you have a case like that where you actually get to help a person out, maybe potentially save his life if he wasn't able to get to a higher level of medical care, it definitely makes it worthwhile, where you think you've actually made a difference.
Talk about meeting Princess Anne.
Yeah, so this actually kind of went back to back when I was a cadet sailing on that sailing vessel Eagle. We actually had a port stop in Bermuda, which was to culminate the New Ports of Bermuda race, which for anyone who's into sailing will know it is probably one of the premier offshore sailing races around the world. It starts in Newport, Rhode Island, and actually ends in Bermuda. So as part of that year, I think because it was some special, it might have been the centennial or something along those lines. They actually had Princess Anne, who is sisters with Queen Elizabeth, the Queen of England. She actually came and actually took a tour of the boat. So I actually got to be one of the side boys, which is kind of like a little honor guard to honor her when she actually got on the boat. So that was kind of cool. And a funny note, which was actually pretty funny, is he was at the same kind of party, was actually Ross Perot, who was once a presidential candidate back in the early 90s. But he was a funny little guy too. Kind of just drove himself around in his little Prius, and was very humble about who he was. So it was definitely kind of interesting. It's one of the cool things is you definitely get to meet a lot of interesting people that you might not otherwise have the opportunity to meet being in the service.
Well, between the Princess Anne story and the Obama inauguration, you definitely have a few stories you can tell in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your family.
Sure.
You mentioned marrying, I guess, a friend from high school, but wasn't somebody that you dated in high school?
So my wife, Shannon, her maiden name is Shannon McGrant. She went to Shawnee with me. She graduated in senior year as I did. So we actually became friends, I think, my junior year, or our junior year, I should say. We were actually in the same history class. So it's funny because with my mom being a history teacher, I've always been a bit of a history nerd myself. So in the class and everything like that, because our names were so similar between McGrant and McCue, I actually sat right behind her. So I think she would always laugh because I would make sarcastic remarks underneath my breath just during class and everything like that. And so she thought that was kind of funny. I guess we share the same sense of humor. So we actually became friends through our junior year and to our senior year. We had kind of the same group of friends. And then honestly, right before we graduated, we kind of thought that there might be a little bit more, something romantically other than just being close friends. So she actually went to Villanova University, which is right outside of Philly. So we kind of started dating right before we graduated. We kind of kept it going, not really knowing, where it would go or anything like that with us just being at different schools and my time being so monopolized by the Coast Guard. But we kind of just stuck it out. We ended up dating pretty much all the way through college. She graduated, and she actually graduated with a degree in finance. So she went to work in New York City on Wall Street when I was in flight school in Florida. So we did the long distance. It wasn't the easiest thing because she, through her job and what she was doing, she actually had rotations where she was abroad to Germany for a couple months, London, Switzerland. So it definitely made the long distance a little bit more challenging. But we found that we still really wanted to be together. And once I moved to Houston and got stationed here, she moved down here because she was able to find a job along the same career fields, and we got married summer 2014. So I guess we could say we always like to joke that we don't consider ourselves high school sweethearts, but I guess we were.
So tell me a little about what you guys like to do. I know obviously work takes up a lot of time, but what do you guys like to do? What are some of your hobbies, activities?
Yeah, so I mean, we like to travel as much as we can. I think we're kind of at that point in our lives and are getting into our late 20s where it seems like every year we have 5 or 6 weddings that we have to go to from friends from whether it be high school or college that are going to get married. So we try and travel a lot. As far as hobbies to do around Houston, we were actually really surprised at how cosmopolitan and metropolitan a city Houston is. There's tons of great restaurants, tons of nightlife. I know she's a big fan of kind of living in New York, of kind of the theater and stuff like that. So as much as I can kind of stomach it, we'll try and go to a musical every once in a while. So really just kind of enjoying the city and kind of exploring all there is in the city of Houston and the greater state of Texas.
You're an avid golfer as well?
Yes, I am an avid golfer. So it's funny, they always say, well, how can you tell an Air Force base from an airport from the air? And you just look for the golf course at the end of the runway. But yeah, no, I love golfing. It was funny when I was in high school. I liked golfing growing up and everything like that, but baseball was always kind of the main interest. And as far as a collegiate or athletic sport or scholastic sport, they always kind of competed with one another since they're both during the spring season. But once I got into college, kind of wasn't really interested in playing baseball in a New England spring and March where it's freezing out. It really just didn't seem like something I would be interested in doing. So I got more into golf. I was actually the president. We didn't have a golf team, but we had a golf club. So I was the president of our golf club my senior year. And then once I moved down to Florida during flight school and since living in Texas, I've definitely gotten bitten by the golf bug. So I try and get out and hit as much as I can whenever I can.
And you have 2 cats?
We do have 2 cats. Yep, they are right now for our kids for the time being until we decide to have some real ones.
When's the last time you were back to Jersey?
I was actually just back in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago to visit with my mom, actually for her birthday, to surprise her. My sister and I actually planned a surprise party for her birthday, so we were lucky enough to fly home around there.
Okay, so great. As we wrap up here, we'd like to look back at high school a little bit before we close the show.
Sure.
Is there anything that you would like to do again or maybe redo back from your high school days?
I always think that's kind of open up Pandora's box if I go back and do anything. I regret nothing about high school. Obviously, high school is always a very awkward and time for everyone. Everyone does something that they might feel silly about, but no, high school was a really great experience. The thing about Shawnee and to a greater extent the Lenape High School District is it provides so many amazing opportunities for the students if they're just willing to kind of maybe go outside their comfort zone a little bit and try something new. Join that club that you weren't maybe on the fence about. Go out for that sports team that you didn't know if you could try, And more often than not, you'll find that you're so happy with your decisions to go out of your way to meet new people. Maybe get outside of your smaller clique of friends and just kind of go meet a lot of people and get to know everyone. You only get one chance to go through high school, so you might as well make the most of it. Just trying to work your hardest, whatever your goal is. Just the schools are great for helping you kind of reach those goals. So if you make your goals known to your teachers, to your guiding counselors, to your coaches, they will go out of your way to help you try and achieve those goals. So I guess that would be the only thing I would go back and change, is maybe try and get involved more.
I appreciate you joining us today to take time out of your busy schedule and share some of your memories with us.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
We've been talking to Shawnee alum Ryan McCue, a rotary wing aviator for the United States Coast Guard. Thank you for joining us, and please join us next time for more alumni interviews on Where Are They Now?